All right, so the first thing I want to show you is this. This is a show I did before a while back. I'm going to do it again about this time next year, and so I'm starting to kind of figure out how things work. But this is the show I referenced last week where I was saying we had two sound operators. We had one person doing QLab, one person on a keyboard. This is the Logic EXS sampler, but I've mapped sound effects to it, okay? So let me just kind of, and I've made this little cutesy interface for it in MainStage. That's not super important, but it does, but it just illustrates, better a little bit what's happening. So let's see, let me go down one. So I'll just kind of take you through, okay? So this is, they're like cleaning a window, right? But the one thing I want you to notice is that every time you don't hear the same squeegee sound every time. Notice that? Yeah, I'll show you how I do that in a second. There's a little splat sound. This little water sound when they squeeze the sponge. Let's see. That's pulling an imaginary sword. And then they wave the sword, the imaginary sword. But notice, again, I'm getting a slightly different switch sound. Okay, I'll show you how I'm doing that. And then I've got a few different little kick drum sounds for different things.
Are those constant?
Yeah. Get the same one each time for each key. And then I've got like a little drum roll that stops me with these, but watch, then there's a cymbal crash right next to it. So there's this trick where he balances on a ball and then has to hold all the things, right? So it's like, is he, will he, won't he? I'm gonna now pick up all of the objects and carry them all over my head. And then when he does it, you go right on command, right? Okay. And everyone will think that, oh, wow, they timed that out perfectly. But, and then here's like a cymbal roll. And then I've got a little gong for another little reveal. It's just a ratchet that loops for a certain little action we're doing. There's little woodblock things we can amplify. I got another little gong. Okay, so let me go up 3 more octaves here. Okay, so there's this whole bit. Every time they get a good idea, they do this, right? A little whistle that they use is when they throw things around. There's a little swanny slide, a little twang. These are just for whatever. And then there's this whole routine where they play tennis with the imaginary racket and ball. So but notice it's not the same ball every time. It's not the same racket every time either. So the ball bounces on the floor. They hit it with the imaginary racket. It bounces on the floor. They hit it with the other imaginary racket. Bounces on the floor. Right? Not going to do that with QLab. Right? That would be a pain in the butt to do with QLab. But doing it a couple keys on a keyboard with a sampler, really easy. Okay? Here's little crash sounds, but again, I got a bunch of them because there's the scene when they're chasing thing 1 and thing 2 around the house, and every time thing 1 and thing 2 throws something, we get a different crash. So I can just hit these crashes all day, and eventually you'd pick up on the pattern, but there's other stuff going on, so you wouldn't notice it. Little splash sound. Okay, so this whole thing where we do car horns. So we do a little car horn song. So they pretend to squish little horns. So I have a whole. It picks up on QLab after that. So they do this thing where they're experimenting with each little horn. And we do that with the keyboard, and then eventually when they figure out what song they want to do, then I've got a whole sequence loaded up in QLab that they just dance along with, okay?
Is it Lean on Me?
No. So here's, it's just a little tune I wrote, but so here's another one I call the sneak, where they're tiptoeing around. So I can do it however fast I want, depending on how the actor moves. And then go faster. Right? Okay, so a couple of interesting things about this. One is maybe that I think this is maybe an example, not so much for your storybook, but maybe it gives you some ideas. You don't necessarily, like if there's a button on your book that goes with a specific sound that is in the story, maybe you have more than one version of that sound. And every time they hit the button, you get a slightly different one. You can make a whole joke out of it. You know, that maybe every once in a while it's a sound that is nothing at all like what the book suggests, you know. That if, like, let's say you have a crash, right? Maybe one time it's a cat screeching or something, you know. And every once in a while there'll be this fun joke that if you hit the button enough times, eventually you'll hear a cat instead of a crash, right? It can be funny. But what I'm getting at is you can program the sampler to not necessarily give you the exact same sound every time, right? You can do different things, and that can lend itself to some fun stuff. The other thing that maybe this illustrates for you is just this idea of nonlinearity and variable timing. Imagine trying to do something like this in QLab, where you wanted that kind of sound, and you were going to like lay that out in a sequence and then get the actors to do it exactly the same way every time. It would take forever. They'd never do it. But you put it on a sample like this with a keyboard, and you just have somebody, sit there and watch them. Every time their foot hits the ground, you just, right? Way better way to do it than putting it in QLab. Okay? So let me show you how I'm doing some of this. The main thing I want to show you is this. It's called the round robin thing that you do with samplers, where you can get it to do multiple things. So here's the sampler. And the main thing that I want you to see, turn off this stuff. Okay, here we go. So I have these four groups, okay, that I call RR1, 2, 3, and 4. RR stands for round robin, okay, and these are groups. And if I go into the zone view, you'll see that in each of these groups I've got different samples loaded, okay, different zones. So this is round robin 1, and so I've got the what is this one? Well, here's the sneak. There's the sneaking, right? So see how it's jumping around between each group. So each of those sounds, those sets of sounds that I want to have change every time, I create a group for however many iterations I want, and then I just create zones inside of that group for all the different things. So I've got the tennis ball. There's a different tennis ball in each one of these things. Now the good news is that each of these zones can be mapped to a very specific note. So you notice that the key range on these are different, right? They're mapped to, like if you look at the sneak one, that's B6. Here it's B6 as well. There it's B6, right? So each zone that is in each separate group they can all be mapped to the same key, even though they're in a different group. Okay, and then what you do is if you go into this group view, there's this view that you can turn on called round robin. And so over here in round robin, you turn on round robin for whatever groups you want to have do it, and it brings up this pop-up menu where you can start adding groups into it. So I could add more than just the 4 if I wanted to, but you see I've got these, and this is the order that it's going to go in. But here's the other groups that are in my list. So you could add as many as you want, and then it will round robin between them. If round robin is turned on for that group, then it becomes part of the cycle. Okay? And that way you can, see? And so it knows that even though I've got 4 different zones mapped to that same key on the sampler, because those zones are loaded into groups that are tagged with round robin, then it knows that whenever I get that note, that's one of the notes that triggers the round robin. So let me find another round robin. There, okay. So look, see that if I alternate between the crash and the thing, it's still round robining in the same order. See what I mean? But you're never really going to do that, so you would never really notice that. It's really, I'm using the same round robin loop for all of those things. So technically, it's round robining all of the round robin sounds every single time I do any one of them. But it only plays the one that I did the note for. So like if I, so I could do this. Right? So it only sounds the ones that you actually hit the keys for, but it round robins all of them. Okay? Yes?
So if, like, your tennis ball, for example, if you only have 3 of those, but you have 4 round robin groups, will it skip the 4th group, or will it play a silence?
Yeah, if you don't have a zone loaded in the 4th one for that note, then you would have a silence there.
Oh, okay.
But if you needed to have a round robin group of 3, that's fine. You just create a separate round robin group, right? You could turn on, like, here's another one,
Right.
and I'll say, okay, that's another round robin group, and I'm going to add this and that, right? So
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I have a round robin set up for mine, 'cause there's a 7.
yeah,
It's on every single page.
yeah,
How do you get it? But so I have like 7 groups, and I'm like, well, this, if I want something that has like 2 iterations.
yeah, yeah. So you could set up a different round robin for that.
Oh,
And you would just have that on a different key than, like,
Well, no, you're already going to do that. So like I've got other things here that I could have round robin. They're not really set up to do that, but different groups here, and you just can turn on round robin for them, and it creates a new round robin called H1. The first one was called B. You know, B. Well, it's B, or this one's H, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4 are which order they're going to go. So I could then add, you know, this one to it. I could add that one to it and see how they're all now in that group, and then they would round robin between them as I go. But if you look at most of these, yeah. So some of these groups have more than one thing in them, like the Swanee up and down. That's just because I want to be able to do like the envelope offsets and stuff for them together, like I showed you last time. But so I'm just showing you another way to use groups, right? Is you can ultimately group zones together for lots of different reasons. One of the reasons you can group them together is because you want to do common envelope offsets, like you want to have a slow fade, a medium fade, and a long fade. But you could also set up groups because you want to round robin things, right? And you do that with groups. Another thing I want to show you is, let's see if I can turn on the zone view here. Find one that does it. Oh, here we go. Okay. So you see how when I push the button and I release it, it still plays through the whole thing? It doesn't cut it off? It's because I have it set to one shot. One shot means play the whole thing no matter what. If you start it, play through the whole thing. That can be really useful. Let me show you one that maybe doesn't do that. Yeah, so if I turn this one off, no one shot, and then I release it, it cuts it off. But I don't want to do that. I think if I trigger that sound, I want to hear the whole thing every time. So I just set one shot, and then it plays all the way through, even if I release the note. That's useful for some things, but not for other things. But that is an option. You can also, there is this reverse thing where it will play it backwards. And it can be backwards and one shot. And playing stuff backwards is a classic sound designer trick. You can get all kinds of fun things from just playing stuff backwards. And the sampler is quite happy to do it backwards in real time. You don't have to edit it. You don't have to make a new file. Not even QLab can do that. Okay? But the sampler is quite happy to play it backwards, which can lead to lots of fun stuff. Okay? So there's a couple of things, couple of ideas I wanted to throw at you. This idea of round robining, the one-shot idea, and then kind of some more examples of this nonlinearity idea of this allows us a narrative structure that doesn't have to happen in any particular order with any particular timing, like the sneaking tiptoe thing, right? When you're starting out early as a sound designer, you just kind of want to like lay everything out in a time sequence and make that the cue, and then you tech that and you try to get it to time out, which sometimes works but often doesn't. And eventually you sort of let go of that, hopefully. You get to a point where, no, I need to like design around the actor's performance and like let them kind of, like if the actor is following your sound cue, I think you're sort of like robbing them of, actors already don't have a lot of autonomy. And if you're like forcing them to conform their performance to your sound cue, and you don't need to do that, I think you should figure out a way to like let them do what they do, because that's part of what they're going to like feel this out. It's going to be different every night. That's what's exciting about theater, is it's not just a movie that is the exact same thing every time you play it. And if you can design your sound cues in a way that allows them to be responsive to that actor's performance, you get much more interesting results. The actors, experiment more. It's interesting. They're more into it. The audience is more into it. You're more into it because you think, oh, what can I do? Like, how many different tennis balls could I come up with? And I've had times when, like actors, they get bored, with stuff, and it's hard for them to kind of like recreate the exact same reaction every time. And so there's times where I'll randomize or I'll round robin sound effects that are supposed to get reactions out of them. And so they never know exactly what sound they're going to hear at that time, and therefore their reaction is always genuine, right? Because it's not the exact same thing every time. So anyway, some things to think about, right? That's something samplers do really well. Nonlinearity, randomization, flexible timing, all things that QLab can do, but it's not as good at it, okay? All right, so now I want to talk about the ways that you set up the control for this, okay? So I'm going to pull up my project and take you through the controlling of it. And there are a few options here. So here's my thing. Let me just turn some of these off. All right. So this is mine. And what I want you to notice is, I'm going to show you, the first thing I'll show you is the app. Okay. So this is my little app that I made to virtualize this little PC1600 controller, which we have a bunch of in the shop. If you want to use this, we have some, okay? I think they're the coolest thing ever, but I'm also a little weird, and I can own that. What's that?
I said I've never thought that.
You've never thought that I'm a little weird?
No, never.
Okay, so let me show you what's going on here. So this is kind of a breakdown. So each button, right? Now, what I want you to notice is that each button, I'm programming this in raw hexadecimal, which is one of the superpowers of this particular controller. So I can put in the raw hex string for all of the things I want to do. So this one, I'm actually writing 2 note on messages. The downside to just using a regular keyboard like this is the keyboard will only send 1 message per key, right? And if you want 2 things to happen at the same time you press that key, you have to map those zones to the same key, which is fine, but then you have to stop them at the same time too. In my case, I have 2 sounds I want to have starting there. The music and the Jeep. But I don't necessarily want to stop those at the same time. I want to stop them separately. So if they're mapped to the same note, then I can't use a note off message to stop one without stopping the other. So it makes more sense to separate them into 2 separate notes so then I can control them separately, which means I have to trigger them separately. So this 903C7F, that's note on for middle C full velocity. 903D7F is note on C sharp above that at full velocity. And then if you look at button 2, now I'm triggering a new message, which is the hyenas. Oh, hang on a second. Stop. Oh, there we go. Sorry, it's the button 2 is the horn. There you go. So that's 903E7F, so that's the D above the middle C. And then if you look at 3, I'm doing the D sharp, the 3F, okay? Okay, I've got those together, okay? And then we go to 4. All right, now I'm starting a bunch of things. Okay, notice that I'm starting 3 things, but then I'm stopping the first thing. I'm doing 803C7F. That's note off for the first sound, which was the original music. That's where I'm making that music stop. So listen, if I go this first. So listen to that loop. All right? So I'm putting a note off in that button to get rid of that music when I start the next music. You see what's happening there? Now I get into here. I'm stopping 2 things here. Okay, so here I'm stopping the Jeep at this button, and which makes sense because I'm doing the screech. So that we shouldn't hear the Jeep engine running anymore. Okay. So I'm showing you this for 2 reasons. One is that if you would like to use this tool, I can make this available to you. I can give you this app, and you can get one of these controllers from the shop and use that, and they can push those buttons. That's an option available to you. To really leverage it, you do have to program this in hex like that, which I taught you what those things mean. You could go watch that video again and remember, because I'm sure you didn't retain all of that information. But it's not super complicated. You just have to keep track of stuff. But it gives you an enormous amount of flexibility because you can start and stop multiple things with 1 button, which you cannot do with something like this. This MIDI keyboard just doesn't do that. There's no way to make it do that. It just isn't set up for that purpose. But this is. So that's an option. You can do that if you would like.
Could we also do kind of, I guess half and half, where maybe we have certain bass, ambient sounds happening for each control, and then we're also maybe having certain triggers
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I know I phrased that weird. Where like we could press 1 and then instead of like writing it in hexadecimal and certain things happening, it could just be like we're playing it on sampler as well.
I mean, I think the spirit of what we're trying to do with this project is you want like one point of control.
Cool.
Like this should be simple enough that a child could do it.
Okay, cool.
Like that is part of the conceit of this assignment, is that, you know, whatever it is, you know, a child shouldn't have to take a class in order to be able to read this book and hear your sounds, right? And do it themselves. Okay? So you want to simplify it enough that a child that is of the reading level of the book that you're doing can read your book and follow the instructions that you add to the book in a way that would make it work. So like in my case, you know, I just put little stickers with the number. And I said every time you see a number, you push the button that has that number. There's other ways you can do that, but that's simple, right? And I just put something like that in front of them, and that's the only option is buttons with numbers. And you could do it with colors, you could do it whatever you want, but you know, just some way that a kid could do it, okay? So yes, resist the temptation to make the interface complicated. The interface should be easy. That's part of the assignment. Okay, another option that you could think about is something like Maximus P. So this is Max, which some of you might be familiar with, others maybe not, but this is a little graphical programming environment. And I made a little interface that has the same buttons, okay? And there's button 1, right? There's the horn. Okay. Stop. Go away. All right, there you go. Now, we have a license to this software as well. There's a key served to this. If you want this on your computer, you can have it. This is a very simple little patch I made. I just created messages for each set of commands I need to do. Now, I'm putting them in decimal because that's how Max has to think about it. So instead of writing it in hexadecimal, you do it in decimal. So like 144, that is 90 in hex, okay? 60 is 3C in hex. 127 is 7F in hex. So you have to convert them, but you know, that's what calculators are for. So I've just typed them out in decimal, what each button needs to do. Okay, and then I have little button objects that trigger those, and then I send them to a MIDI out object, and it just sends the raw MIDI data out to a thing. Okay? And then I've got a message that I use to do the stop, the panic. Okay, and I could map that to as a shortcut in Logic, and it would be fine. Okay? If you're interested in trying this, I'm happy to make this available to you as well. You could even, if you, like let's say you had something like this, and you wanted to use like these buttons, these pad buttons, drum pads or something. You can't change necessarily dramatically what these do. They can only send one message. It can be a note, a program change, or whatever. But you could send that into Max and tie the commands that this does to the software buttons you do, and then Max then relays a different MIDI message into Logic. So you're basically using Max as the in-between between your keyboard controller and the sampler, so it's converting the messages into what you want, and you get to use this controller. Okay, I've done that before. It's fine. It's kind of an extra step that I'm not sure is necessary, but some people that makes sense too. Another option is I want to show you how you can wrangle QLab to do this for you. So let me pull up QLab here, and there's a few options here. But the first thing is we need to set up the MIDI patch. So I'm going to set up a new MIDI patch, and this will go out to the Logic Pro Virtual In. And here you can, what you're going to have to do is, QLab will do MIDI messages, but your options here are you can do MIDI voice messages where you just select the messages from a list, one message per command or per cue, or you can do a sysx message, but systems exclusive, it adds the F0 and the F7 as part of that. So even though you could technically type raw hex into here, it is going to do a F0 and F7 as part of that, which may or may not cause trouble. I mean, theoretically, it shouldn't matter because those raw MIDI messages you put in there could not exist inside of a hexadecimal or inside of a system exclusive message because they have status bytes in them. But is it going to think the data bytes are part of the system exclusive, or is it going to think of the part, it could get dicey, is what I'm saying. So what you end up having to do is you do this. So I'll do the first one, note on, middle C, full velocity. And this will be start music loop 1. And then I'll make another one. And this will be note on 61, 127. Okay. And this will be start Jeep loop. And then you can either link them with an auto continue, or if you're the kind of person that likes timeline groups, you can do that, and you can just call this button 1. Right? And you could continue, you could build these out like that, okay? So then I could say, all right, what's the next one? 3, okay, so that'll be 127. We'll call this button 2. Okay. And then, let's see, button 3 is going to be 6-3, 27, button 3. Oop. I did, didn't I? Okay. There you go. Right. So you could, and then every once in a while you'll have ones that need more than multiple things, multiple node-ons, node-offs. But then what you could do at that point is you have a couple options. You could set up hotkeys on the computer keyboard as triggers for this. So you could do a hotkey trigger, and this would be number 1. Okay, this would be number 2. This would be number 3. So now I hit 1, I get that. I hit 2. I hit 3. Okay. Or if you want to get a little slicker, you can create a cart view and could do what's that?
I've never seen this before.
So I'm going to make some carts here. Oh, come on. Okay, so this will be 0.5. And this will be 3. This will be 4. You can even change the color of each of them. Make that be the red one. And this can be the orange button. This could be the yellow button. Okay. And yeah, okay. And then what you end up doing is if you go into show mode then, and you close this, all you see is this. And now you can say, yeah, you could have them triggered by hotkeys as well. Okay.
And how do you map those buttons to the pads on the keyboard? That's like
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, so here you could, if you go back into edit mode, you could say, all right, so this one, the trigger for this will be
Oh.
capture that. And I would do any there, and that way it'll, yes. So now, right? And then,
If you write any as the velocity, does it exclude 0? Because
I
then the question is
think
what
so.
note off, but
I'd have to look that up, but I think so.
yeah, well, 'cause some do a note on this if the velocity is 0, and some do a note off message.
Yeah.
So, doesn't
Well, the velocity is what you,
Yeah.
what pressure.
Yeah, I'm just saying you need to ignore velocity because you never know how hard you can hit that button, right? Oh, hang on, I didn't turn that one on. There we go.
Any difference on how hard you get that button down?
Any just means it doesn't matter how hard I hit the button; it'll work every time. But it doesn't do as it ignores the 0 because otherwise it would stop all this stuff when I released it, right? So it must ignore the 0.
Unless that is set to
What's that?
unless your keyboard is actually setting true net off.
Right. Which it might.
I don't know.
We could find out.
Have to do many.
Let's find out.
Find out.
Oh gosh. That's
Oh, right, because this just tells you.
Show me.
Oh. Never mind.
Well, it's definitely doing.
We need the actual.
Oh yeah, it is doing an 8-0.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
So that's why.
Yeah,
So that could work. So that's an option, and this is an example of like turning QLab into a nonlinear controller. Okay, using the cart window. And if you wanted to be like super slick, you could even get out the iPad app for QLab control and have that be the view of the cart that's actually controlling the computer.
Okay.
Okay. So any of these options are fair game. I'm just showing you what some possibilities are. There are more than what I'm showing you. The point is you just need to figure out a way to send the appropriate MIDI messages into the sampler and present it in a way that a child could understand it. Yes, so.
That QLab iPad app, is that in the version that you pay $40 for, or in the version that's free?
I don't know. Should we find out? I mean, I think I have the one you paid for, but
I have the free one.
um,
I'm on my iPad. I was like, where is it?
because I think it'll.
Because I don't think it'll. Anytime I've tried to control anything, it's like you can only use them. I'm like, come on, why would I want this? Oh, maybe I don't. Maybe I deleted it because I got mad at it.
Let me switch this.
It looks like I was
You have a hotspot named Beatrice
Benedict.
Benedict.
I don't have a Beatrice, no.
Yeah, it's much ado about nothing.
Ah, well,
That's good.
it's a good one. You right?
Come on.
I think I did in high school. I need to read it though. Something, I think there's like a show up that I watch. We hope you enjoy
Oh
it
yeah,
more.
there's one. I haven't watched it yet, but I've only ever heard good things. That has like David Tennant.
Oh.
There it is.
I
Okay.
haven't watched it yet. You know who Catherine Tate is? She's in.
The face
She's
of
in
it.
Doctor Who with him, and the two of them are like. They have fascinating dialogue. Yeah.
She plays Natalie in The Office, the ginger lady. So I get it.
I wanna go.
She's yeah. The two of them play Beatrice and Benedict in a version.
That's.
And I know it's like available out, like it's not the highest quality recording, but like they're pretty decent. Yes, I haven't watched it. I've just seen like I've seen snippets of it.
Is that romantic comedy or romantic drama?
I mean, it's definitely a comedy.
Comedy.
Okay.
Yeah, much ado.
Maybe it's a comedy drama.
And that version is.
Well, I
very
mean,
much
Shakespeare had
like-
three categories, basically. There's like
There's
historical tragedy.
scenes where like David Tennant's like in little shorts and
OSC access 6934.
Picturing a pie in his face, and I was like, what?
Okay.
What is this?
There you go.
So is that the free version?
This is the paid version, but I think the free version, I don't know what the limitations are of the free version, but
I mean, I just downloaded it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, you just have to experiment a little bit with it. I'm not really sure. I mean, the free version might just
Is the free version view only?
probably, maybe, I don't know. But if you're interested, play around with it and see. If you can't make it work, whatever. But this is kind of just an example of something really simple, right? That even hides the QLabiness of it, and you can actually touch the red button as opposed to, going whatever. Okay. Another option would be something like TouchOSC, which I'm not going to spend time to show you because that's like a whole other rabbit hole. But that's like what we're using. That's what we're using for Soundscape, and TouchOSC will relay MIDI messages, okay, or OSC messages. You could set up a completely custom interface on TouchOSC that had buttons with pictures on them even, and those could send direct OSC messages into something like QLab, which could then send the MIDI messages, or you could just send MIDI messages straight from TouchOSC into Logic, and that would be okay too. Either way. I'm saying there's options. I don't really care which one you do. I'm just showing you what some of the possibilities are. There's some I'm not even showing you. Like you can make the Digico do it with all the soft keys on the Digico. So you think about it, figure out how you want to do it. But again, the spirit of this is whatever interface you present, you need to figure out a way to make it simple enough that a child could do it. They should not have to have, half of a degree in sound design in order to do it. Okay? That's part of what I'm interested in you figuring out. Not that children are the point. It's just that that's just a nice way of me forcing you to like simplify an interface, right? Don't do it. You're going to have to do something complicated to ultimately deliver something not complicated, and I think that's really important because, like, if I go back to the Cat in the Hat thing, I had an actor doing that. So that main stage thing and the keyboard, I put that in front of an actor that didn't know anything about sound, and yeah, and they just played. And I gave it to him first day of rehearsal. I said, "Here's all the sounds I can envision using in some of the moments, and you play around with it, and you find what you want to use. Make notes of where you want to use stuff. If you want to change stuff, whatever, let me know. I'll reprogram whatever." And he figured it out. It was easy because it was like, "Oh, great! I can just push these buttons. I figure it out. I don't have to know what's going on." Right? So that's the point. Is sometimes you have to be able to generate that kind of interface into your sound cues because it's not always a sound expert who is controlling stuff. Okay?
On QLab's website, it says you can't use it to start or stop cues in the free version.
Probably, yeah.
You can probably look at that.
You can look at the buttons, yeah.
And,
How much is the app? I forget.
$40.
Okay. Well,
Because I was going to fiddle with it on Nvidia, I was like, ooh, let me go start cues. I was like, let me just
I will say I clearly paid for it at some point. Yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago whenever I did it. So long ago that I forgot ever paying for it and how much it was. And I use it all the time.
I billed it to a company that I was working for.
Yeah.
And the projections, I'm like, I'm not bringing my laptop
Yeah.
up.
That's the best way to do it. That's the best way to get gear, by the way. Best way to get your own gear and your own tools is to, when you're on a job, say, well, to do the thing, this is the stuff that we need. And they say, we don't have that stuff. And you can say, well, then you can either buy it or you can rent it from me. And I've done that a lot of times. I've gotten free gear that way all the time because you can say, well, you can rent it from me for X amount of dollars, and
You just go and buy it with that much discount.
yeah. And you figure out how much of a tax write-off you can get for buying the whole thing, and you figure out what the difference of that is, and then that's what you charge for rental, and then you effectively get it for free, right? I've done that so many times. It's a great way to get free stuff, and a tax write-off on the top of it. So Because when you get self-employment income, heads up, your taxes get a lot more complicated. Okay? Okay, other questions? Yes, Eric?
So like looking at this screen, I think it, like you're putting this in front of an actor. Would you have to like rename start button?
Oh yeah, I probably would. Like I would go into these and, you know, rename these. I would say this would be page. You could even call them like page 1 or whatever. You know, whatever you would want. You could name it whatever you want. Yeah, red. You could even put the text of the book there. I don't know, what would it be? Oh yeah. Racing in my sturdy Jeep. We'll see. Will it show up on the cart? No. Well, I could put it here. Right. There you go. Lots of options. Okay. Other questions?
Was this like a new thing with QLab 5?
No, this has been around at least QLab 3, I think, was pretty sure.
Because the last one I worked on was 3, and I do not remember this.
Yeah. QCarts have been around for a while.
Okay.
I mean, the idea of a cart is a really old, but this is like predates computer playback to begin with. It started with radio stations and the theater did it, but a cart was basically a type of cassette tape. It was the same kind of idea of it, like an 8-track tape. I don't know if you've ever seen those. But it's basically got a tape that's looped inside of it. And so you stick it in there, and it's just got a short little bit of, and you can actually build them to be exactly the length of tape that you need for the sound you want. And so what radio stations would do is they would have this like stack of carts, you know, and each cart would have the little sound effects. So you're like a morning radio DJ, and you got to do all your obnoxious sound effects, you know, and you would just like pull out the car horn, you know, like stick it in the thing, and what's cool is as soon as you stick it in, it automatically plays, right? And then you just pull it out, you know, pull it in. And so we used to do that all the time for theater. We used to make your own carts, you know, and we would do that for individual sound effects. And then like the music tracks that were longer were on the reel-to-reel. So you would have like the long cues on the reel-to-reel, and the short cues were on the carts, and you're just like sticking the tapes in and pull them back out again. So that's what this is mimicking, is the idea of the carts. That's why they call it QCart, because it's the QLab virtualization of the old cart idea. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Not yet.
Okay. So get to work again and make some progress on this. I'll be here for the rest of the time and can help you with whatever you're stuck on. And
Was there a page maximum for our book? Because like I have a book, it's 40 pages, but it's like 1 sentence per page.
well, I'm not saying a page limit. I'm saying a button limit of 15. No more than 15 buttons. And by the way, you should also have a panic button. So, well, a panic button could be the 16th button, right? So you can have 15 buttons that make sounds happen, and a 16th could be a panic button to turn the thing off. But that's it. Like, so you got it. So I don't care so much about pages as much as I care about number of buttons that have to. That's just I'm trying to scope control for you, so you don't let yourself go out of control. Yes.
I'm not sure that I haven't decided what control method I'm